Is religious persecution really happening here in the United States of America? According to Ambassador Sam Brownback, America's top international religious freedom expert, the answer is a resounding yes. From banks shutting down Christian accounts to believers losing jobs for their convictions, the warning signs are everywhere. In this exclusive interview, Brownback explains how and why the threat is growing. We also highlight a chilling example. The leader of the Family Policy Council in New York was recently jailed after standing boldly for life and family principles in his state. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you back with us for Speak Up Virginia. Today, we have a really interesting interview with Ambassador Sam Brownback, and we caught up with him at the Social Conservative Conference a little bit ago, and he had some really fascinating things to share about how religious persecution is not just happening overseas. We're seeing it more and more here, so that's sobering. But before we get into that, Victoria, I really wanted to give you a chance to share this really chilling example. It's probably one of the most disturbing things we've seen in a long time with a friend and colleague of yours. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I think the ambassador is going to speak to this growing threat to people of faith who engage in the public square, and we have that going on even in our own movement. So Jason McGuire is the head of New York Families Foundation. It's basically the same thing as the Family Foundation, but in New York. So the Family Policy Council up there, he's a husband and a father, and he's been leading the fight on some of the hard issues. So, pro-life and traditional marriage and all the things that kind of throw us in the news and keep us under, in the moment of controversy or whatever's going on.
And just so people understand, this is Victoria in New York.
This is me in another state. There's about 40 of me in other states, and he's one of them. He does a fantastic job, but part of doing a fantastic job got him in the crosshairs of their Attorney General. Everyone might know her name, Letitia James.
Yes.
She has been on the news quite a bit over the last certainly over the last year, but even more than that, as her office has been constantly targeting President Trump, and they've been in battles. But let me tell you a little bit about what happened. Essentially, Jason and their job was fighting the good fight, and went so far as to fight her office kind of directly because they were trying to collect and retain nonprofit donor information. And he viewed that as a violation of the First Amendment, which we would as well not want to turn in names simply because they support conservative causes.
Because she might target people?
Right.
Imagine that.
Like, for exactly the reason that turns out to be the case. He didn't want to do that and was fighting her. And so Jason found himself in her crosshairs. And what that means is that her office basically started and my understanding is more than 3 years worth of harassing, looking into himself, his family, other organizations that he's involved with. So he's not just involved, obviously, as he runs the Family Policy Council, but he's involved in a Christian school. He's involved in something called the Constitutional Party, as opposed to it's a political party. She started basically looking into all of those things that he touched and
he's
trying
a pastor,
to. He's
too.
a pastor too.
Yeah.
So his church. It was unbelievable. And what they started doing is asking for donor lists. They bank records, sort of monitoring activity, even threatening his wife. It was pretty unbelievable. And he did not turn over things that he didn't have to turn over, right? So you don't just volunteer to, do all that, but he dealt with this for years, and then they subpoenaed records. So eventually, with a subpoena, you're going to have to turn certain things over. So the state scoured every corner of Jason's world, so to speak, and certainly most specifically his organization, the Family Policy Council up there. And at the end of the day, after all of that, the only thing they could find was that there were $1,238. Let me say that again.
Wow.
$1,238, not of lost money, not of missing money, of money where they didn't have a matching receipt. So basically, when people turn in reimbursements or, you have a credit card, we always try to make sure you've got a receipt that shows exactly where you spent that. Years worth of those.
Wow.
And they found a few missing receipts. And for that, Jason was recently brought up on charges and then ultimately sentenced to serving 8 weekends in county jail, basically put in prison, so to speak, for this omission, which is an omission that a gazillion people make and nobody ever goes to prison for.
Yeah.
It's pretty absurd. But he had to plead guilty because it was going to cost his organization hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight these $1,283 of unmatched receipts.
Yeah, and that really is the essence of lawfare. I don't think everybody understands what a disturbing precedent that is when we see this. Help us understand how this is being weaponized, why people should care about it, because it seems removed to a lot of people, but it's a real thing.
People need to understand that there are just so many laws and so many things that any business or nonprofit is trying to keep up with constantly, right? These are all best practices. We are all doing all of our due diligence, but mistakes are going to be made, and that happens all the time. And if an elected official, an attorney general, or a law enforcement personnel wants to go after somebody, they're going to find something. It's just inevitable. There's going to be something like a missing receipt. And so when you see that, and then you see it turn into not simply oh, by the way, you missed this receipt, let me let you know. When you see it turn into charges and ultimately end up with prison time over something like that, you know this is so beyond those receipts. This is a targeted attempt to shut down, to silence. And of course, keep in mind, what was the most concerning about this process is when you go after an organization like that and you start subpoenaing, they're subpoenaing donor records too. So they're going to the donors, the supporters of the organization, and they're saying, oh, by the way, we think that organization you supported, they did something shady. That's what they're trying to convey. And those donors, of course, are going to freeze up and go, oh, should I still be supporting them?
Yeah.
Even though it turns out this is a nothing burger, it really is alarming because you lose your financial support. So that's what they're after.
And he was fighting a lot of the same battles that we face here.
Yes.
The abortion issue, the transgender stuff in the schools. He's speaking out on all of that. And then, of course, as you said, he did have the guts to, hold her office accountable and speak out publicly. And so, I think about our attorney here, Josh Hetzler, often says that the punishment, the process is the punishment.
Oh, certainly.
And
When you think about somebody having 3 years of them digging into every entity and person that he touches, imagine what that would actually be like. And so you're walking around knowing you haven't done anything, but you are having everyone you know is doubting, questioning what's going on. And then, of course, the decision of what happens. Okay, the jury's finally, and for a long time, and Jason and I would talk about this while it was going on confidentially, and for a long time, he didn't know what they were after. So they're digging around, and he doesn't even, he's not even told why they're digging around, which to me is just an issue of justice, right? Like, we should at least know, if you've got law enforcement digging around, you should at least have a clue. What are they looking for? What do they think you've done? There should be a reason. And there was not clarity in that whole process. So imagine just dealing with that for years, then coming up with these receipts. And, he'll fully admit there are not, there mistakes have been made, but it's just alarming that he then has to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to plead guilty and ultimately serve time. And what happened in this is the Attorney General's office actually made a misstatement. The moment that they settled and agreed, okay, I'll take the guilty misdemeanors for this. Of course, the belief is, of course, you're not going to go to jail because no one ever has for this.
Yeah.
But the moment that happened, the Attorney General actually put out a false statement accusing him of something that was not what he settled on. And so just all that's trapped up in that, because that goes into the headlines.
It's a smear.
It's a smear campaign. And so it's really intended to shut you down as a leader. It's intended to stop financing to your organization. And if he were a person who cowered in fear, he would have stepped out of that job 3 years ago. He would have said, okay, this is, but no, he's a person who is willing to continue to speak truth to power. And that's the thing. These are outside organizations, ours and others, are called to speak truth regardless of where the chips fall, regardless of who you upset, right? Because we're in the space of politics. You're going to upset some powerful people. But that's the job that we have in putting the issues forward, putting forward true voting records. I mean, sometimes we have legislators get very, very angry about voting records. Sometimes attorney generals get very, very, very angry about things that we're looking into, or FOIA requests. We often ask hard questions of the government. Tell us where you've spent this money. It doesn't make friends, but it sure shouldn't land you in jail.
Right. And I even think on the micro level, people just need to be aware of this kind of trying to use the law as a weapon, criminalizing, politicizing that process. Because I think on the micro level, maybe not so micro, but the Loudoun boys.
Yeah, I mean, you have it in school systems where kids are getting targeted for ridiculous reasons.
For speech. They're criminalizing speech. You know, I don't know if they call it a crime, but they're basically saying they're guilty.
If the school system were a court system, it would be a crime.
Sexual harassment.
And it's being punished.
Yeah.
So I would say, you know, it's being treated like a crime. And we as believers just have to understand that Christians are often the ones that are at the forward facing of this. We're often the ones because the things that we speak are not popular in culture. And so that's the reality. That's what Jason's facing. He has served several weekends already. It's a beautiful thing, though, to see the body of Christ come around him every weekend. They're praying him into...
Talk about praying for him.
Yeah, I mean, we had an event right before, literally, SoConCon that we were out at was... the week of SoConCon, he had to fly home and check into prison for the first time that 6 o'clock that Friday night or something like that. And so we spent a beautiful moment of prayer where all the different state leaders were around him praying for him. And he has had the benefit of every Friday when he goes in, some of his community is coming outside the prison and they're praying him into prison. And he's a pastor. And I always think, well, we know that God has used pastors in jail before. We have wonderful biblical stories about that. And so I know that God is using this. But as a father, I mean, his daughter is getting married in literally just weeks. And he was very worried that this was going to cross into her wedding. As long as it is executed as planned, he should get to his daughter's wedding. But I mean, those are things that are very real. And when we say, you know, be prepared to own our words. I mean, when you work for the Family Foundation, you kind of know that you are putting yourself out there in the public eye and you could make enemies. And we're certainly praying that we don't ever have an attorney general like Letitia James who would...
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the irony that she's actually facing.
I mean, she's facing her own. Yeah, this is you know, sometimes the corruption within is why you go after somebody else. It's sort of like, you know, take the eye off the ball.
We don't even have time to get into all that.
Right. Yeah, sorry. But, yeah.
Well, let me just read a little bit. He wrote a blog, and I just want to kind of wrap this part up by just sharing a little bit from him personally. And he says, today, in the eyes of the state of New York, I am inmate 090198, locked down in the Echo Block 4 for 60 hours in the Livingston County Jail. This is my first experience of incarceration. So I think when he was first put in, he wrote that, and he actually went into isolation. I don't know. He was.
Yeah, he said he's like kind of like locked off from other people in a lot of the time that he's there.
Yeah, so I'm looking where he talks about being in total isolation, no mattress, just a cold metal shelf, no comforts. Even more disorienting is the presence of female deputies serving as my primary jail guards. Their professionalism is appreciated, he says, though the lack of privacy, particularly regarding basic hygiene, is a new and humbling experience. So you can feel from there. But he says, I'm not without hope. He's quoting Romans 5:3-5 that reminds us. He reminds himself reading the scripture that we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame. So this is a really great thing to, I think, it's not great, but to segue into what Ambassador Sam Brownback was talking about, how he was warning, this is starting to be more of a problem in the United States. So I think this example is really appropriate. And Victoria, before we head into Sam Brownback, what is the main takeaway you want really for people to understand from this case?
I think we as believers just need to be prepared that we are standing with truth, that we're standing with God's word in a lot of cases, and that there are ramifications. And it's really hard to watch a brother go through this. Mm-hmm. I think we need to be prayerful about our justice system. We need to be prayerful about our leaders. That, you know, when it talks about praying for your leaders, some of it is so that you may live peaceably. It's literally this. It's that they don't misuse the law and misuse justice because it will harm human beings. And so I just, am prayerful that our country would get back to a place where justice is equally applied, where people are not targeted for either their faith or just being very straightforward about, boys being boys and girls. I mean, think about some of the things that are the most controversial right now. They're also the most biological realities.
Yeah, really. And that's why people got to keep speaking up. Yes. I mean, just even with Jason, speaking up about this and not refusing
cowering.
he's not cowering. Yeah. Yep. All right, well, let's get right into our conversation with U.S. Ambassador Sam Brownback. As I mentioned, he's known for calling attention to religious persecution worldwide, but now he's raising alarms about what's happening in our own country. So without further ado, here is U.S. Ambassador Sam Brownback. We are at the Social Conservative Policy Conference, SoConCon 2025, and we are back with another wonderful speaker. This time we have Ambassador Sam Brownback. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, pleasure to do it. Pleasure to join you. And thank you guys for your great work that you guys do. You are excellent and fighting a great fight in a place that's a pretty tough battlefield.
Appreciate that. I know you know all about tough battles. Yeah. I'll just tell our audience a few things about you. Ambassador Brownback has been a long time staunch defender of the family, of life, and religious freedom. He has served as ambassador in the White House, ambassador internationally for religious freedom, former governor of Kansas, and currently you're helping lead several organizations, both international and national, for religious freedom.
Yes. That's the current effort is I'm co-chairing the International Religious Freedom Summit, which is the largest gathering of religious freedom advocates around the world. And we do that annually in D.C. And I'm also helping to lead the National Council and National Committee for Religious Freedom, which is just focused on domestic issues, which is a kind of a tougher play, honestly, because most people think, well, we don't have religious persecution in the United States. And you're going, well, the effort here looks different because it's its effort to suffocate people of faith, but it's no less pernicious, and it's something we've really got to push back against.
Yeah. Well, and you've experienced this personally, which you talked about, right?
We were thrilled to have you. He came down for one of our events and gave a talk about being chased away, which was about Chase Bank. And, and it was very timely. We had been kicked out of a restaurant. And so we had sort of dealt with some of this like cancel culture stuff, but obviously the debanking is a much bigger deal. So we appreciate you I think our folks really appreciated just the tangible nature of sometimes the things you do, there's a cost to it. And you experience that by being debanked.
We did. We formed this National Committee for Religious Freedom. Within 40 days, Chase Bank had canceled our bank account that we had started with them. But I think it was a gift from the Lord because, I look at it and these things were happening to people, but back then, so this is like 3 years ago, most people just kind of shied away and said, okay, let's go find another bank. And we're going, no. We're going to fight this because this is happening way too much and it shouldn't happen at all. Yeah. And so we kept going after Chase with it, and they gave us different answers over time, still never really said we did anything. They said they didn't do anything wrong, but did ultimately change one of their policies. And we just got to constantly push back against those things. So people that stand up for traditional basis of Judeo-Christian ethics, we're going to have to stand up and fight for it.
And It's crazy that it's become to the point where, I know we tried to run a debanking bill in Virginia to say, like, this should not happen. We were unsuccessful. So, it is still sort of a possibility in our Commonwealth. I think there are other states, Tennessee and some others, that have done a better job because, we cancel culture cannot get to the point where we are boxed out of the market, essentially.
And I love what you're saying about you've got to stand up. Individuals are going to have courage. And Victoria, if you could kind of share with the ambassador what our legal team's doing, just that illustrates that need for personal courage. Because if we don't have people standing up, we don't have these cases.
Yeah, we've talked about them on our call with this coalition. But our law center is discovering, I would say, that this suffocation, I think that's a good analogy of believers, is real. We've represented this realtor that simply tried to express his own personal views on his own personal Facebook. And for that, the Realtor Association attempted to essentially take his license. He's still in the middle of battling through that. Now, the good news is that despite the Virginia Realtor Association coming down on him, the national has come back. When you apply pressure, sometimes we get good response. So the National Realtor Association has actually changed. They said they've clarified the rule, but if it's clarifying, then our guy really should be innocent. So it's an interesting game they're trying to play there. But we don't want to see Christians in private associations, sort of discriminated against for what they believe and how they express their faith.
But your point about getting out there and somebody standing up, I had one of these big bank chairmen told one of the U.S. senators that this is secondhand from them, so it's not reliable that way. But I think the sentiment's right. Said, look, we get all this pressure from the left to not fund or to not work with these traditional value groups and everything. We need some people kind of pushing us from the right because they're noisier on the left. They're inside the organization saying, well, we don't like this. We've got to, on the outside, say, oh, wait a minute, I'm just standing up for a over 2,000 year faith that hasn't changed and that we've had whole societies, including the United States of America, generally organize themselves around these principles successfully, I might say, successfully. Why are you throwing this out? Why are you persecuting this? And you're just not the latest cultural trend. And so, but I do think now, and particularly the election of President Trump and his announcement of the Religious Freedom Commission that's domestically focusing on this is really the season to push back on these things.
What is your hope for that commission? I mean, what would you love to see them do, or what do you hope that they at least talk about, or?
Well, one, I'm just delighted it's happening because the light scurries things away. Because the left was doing these things surreptitiously often, or they would de-insurance a crisis pregnancy center, or there'd be a community foundation that say, well, we'll give to all these groups, but not these conservative pro-life groups over here. And you're going, this is just happening. By the commission being out there, you got a light. So now all this stuff scurrying off the field because I don't want to be exposed on this. So that's helpful. But I do hope we get legislation against the sort of persecution of people based upon their faith and their traditional values that come with that faith. I think that's the piece that people are saying, well, you're not persecuted for your faith. Well, but my faith does have certain things that it calls right and calls wrong, some things it calls sin. And I'm a sinful man. Yeah. I am by no means perfect at all, but I try to live by those, and I find those values very helpful as society has for centuries. Yeah. And we need to defend that.
Unless people think that there isn't actual persecution. I think losing your job is persecution. And our law center routinely represents people who've lost their job. And some of them, it's a religious exemption. We had all that with the COVID stuff. Sometimes it's the way your faith has to play out because you're being asked to do something that violates your faith. And so, I would argue if you lose your ability to have a livelihood, that's that's how it started in history with banking. Correct. We're not in prison.
Eating at restaurants.
Right.
I'm just curious, how is the commission going to be a step different than the ambassador for international religious freedom?
The ambassadorship was all international. Okay. I could deal in every country in the world except one, and that was the United States of America. Okay. And that was a political trade that was made at the time because we wanted broad bipartisan support for it, Republican and Democrats. And people overseas say, okay, we agree on this. But when it comes domestically, these things take more and more of a Republican Democrat patina to them. And so the ambassador could not deal with U.S. issues. Wow. The report we do on international religious freedom, which is the gold standard report around the world, reports on every country in the world except one.
Fascinating.
We don't want to expose our own issues.
It's sad that we need that now. Well, speaking of that, tell us what's kind of the hot spot right now internationally and what lessons can we learn from that here in the U.S.?
The two that I would really put out there, and they're in different types of categories. One is China and its satellites, and the other is the middle belt of Africa. The China communist, they cannot stand religion. Religion is the thing they fear the most.
Because it has power.
And it's in a different field. Communism doesn't believe there's a God. So you're playing on a different plane, and you have all this allegiance by people of faith that will do things that they don't believe the communist government is perfect, but they do seek a higher power that is. And so they just can't control. So it's satellites in places like Burma, and you're seeing more of this come out in Nicaragua and Cuba. You're seeing really Russia now getting more into religious persecution. And then that middle belt in Africa is just It's becoming a killing field for Christians by radical Muslims. Nigeria, but it's all that Sahel region, the countries around it. They're weak governed. They often just kind of don't even really want to admit these things are going on. And meanwhile, being in Nigeria is one of the most deadly places you can be a Christian on the planet.
And what are some lessons we should learn from that? Because we take a lot of our rights for granted. Here in the U.S., it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could reflect those countries in some ways if we don't start standing up for our freedoms.
Particularly with all the surveillance technology now that's out there, and the Chinese have pioneered, but we're not. We've got
We're
the
not
same.
far behind.
Yeah, we've got the same capacity. I mean, you walk into any place now, and you've got a photo ID. Yeah, and they know it's Victoria Cobb, and your accounts and everything, it's getting tracked. We've got to really, I think, work at protecting that religious freedom here with that onslaught of that new pervasive technology. Is something that I really look at. And one of them that I really get concerned about is digitizing currency, because I just get really concerned that that's going to get manipulated. Right now, I've got President Trump, not so concerned about it, but you don't know when things are going to switch back, and then your ideas are out of favor.
Yeah.
You can Christians are doing fine now, but you don't know what's going to happen in a few years, and that you're back out of favor.
China has that social credit system.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But and they've beta tested and perfected how you really find the needle in the haystack. You find the leader of that Christian group, and you go and get that person. Why do you find him? Well, everybody's got one of these things on, so you're listening to the conversations that they're doing there. You search for key data, key words. If you ever say the word Jesus, or if you say the word Muhammad, okay. Yeah, I mean, and there may be 10 million conversations going on out there, but that search capacity is now able to find that one that says okay, get him. And these things they're powerful technology. That's the thing that the authoritarians haven't had in the past that they've got now, is this technological capacity to really pinpoint who's doing what and go after them.
We know it works because we get ads after we've talked with our phones there.
Exactly.
And Victoria, you were bringing up one of your biggest concerns is with the development of AI and
I just think we need to be paying close attention and be very mindful that as things are, I think you've made the point very well that, the bottom line is the search capacities go faster and reach quicker and are more specific. And out of that comes the reality that if we don't protect our freedoms, that gets used in really, really inappropriate ways. And I worry about, because again, anytime you have a reason that the government can say, well, as a matter of safety.
Yeah, that's how it gets sold.
9/11, or as a matter of, or a health, we've had
public
some
health
other,
emergency.
public health emergency. We've had conversations about that here. And so they can use these things to create more surveillance, and then they get misused later. I mean, I'm intrigued right now about the fact that the left is starting to worry about surveillance because of ICE. It's just interesting to me that they're starting to pay a little attention to how are we using this against people, what they want to protect. Well, maybe we can come together and say, okay, how do we police ourselves is essentially what we're saying, so that religious freedom in our case is not jeopardized. So that people have faith. And I appreciate that your commission has been also paying close attention to the anti-Semitism issue.
Yes.
And, we got a big ruling with Columbia University.
Yeah, huge.
And I mean, our universities have not exactly been a place where religious freedom always thrives. I mean, it used to be the university was the place where we exchanged ideas. But now it seems only certain ideas. And the ones that contain faith in God, those haven't been so popular at our university level.
And I'm a university graduate. I'm a lawyer. I believe in higher education, but what's happened over time is they've so filtered the faculty. Faculty hires faculty. So you get a liberal faculty, they hire a liberal faculty. Remember, you get more purified liberal faculty, and now you've got these universities that 91% are liberal. Yep. It's hard to find a conservative, and then you're going, oh, wait a minute, what happened to the free flow of ideas, the exchange, the combat of ideas, to where you wanted these various viewpoints so that you could come up with with knowledge that would stand the test of time. And instead, you've just got these things tilted and becoming too ideologically bent and not educationally focused. And that's really got to be corrected.
Well, speaking of the education system, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the Supreme Court case, Mahmoud versus Taylor, because that seems like it took a giant step for religious freedom. What are your thoughts on that?
It did. I was really pleased with that case. This Supreme Court has been the best court on religious freedom, I would argue, in the history of the Republic.
Yeah.
They have really taken on the free exercise clause and undone a bunch of damage that had been done over the prior 50 years by the Supreme Court to defend this right of free exercise that is central to the founding of the Republic of the United States. This thing is central to maintenance for the United States, and them protecting and defending and broadening it is really helpful.
Well, I think about where we were in the Obama era where, they were talking about freedom to worship, where there was really a trajectory. We were starting to head down a road where it was, we'll let you do your thing in your building, but that's it. And that was not what our founders, our entire nation was built on. We expect you to be people of faith and to show up with your faith in the public square and contribute in the public square with your faith. And we were headed down this very different, and I feel like having the Supreme Court where they are has kept us from further down this road, and they've come back to the true understanding that I think our framers intended.
I do too. And I don't think people recognize just how central this is to the very core of what it is to be the United States, and how central this is to the world that we protect it, because any ground you lose here on religious freedom gets magnified all over the world. Mm-hmm. It'll be more ground lost, and we've already lost a ton of ground.
Yeah, as an organization based in Richmond, we often talk about, the Statue of Religious Freedom, founded right there in our home area, became the model for not just the United States, but the Western Hemisphere, and is really what we've tried to export around the country. And
look at what good it does. Because you have that, then you can have this very diverse society of people of all faith or none at all coming together and okay, if you want to be a Hindu, fine. I'm not a Hindu, but you want to do that. You want to be Muslim, okay. I'm a follower of Jesus, great. But we can work and form a society that can function together. In so many places around the world, that does not happen and cannot happen because the dominant religion is just shoved everybody else out, run them out, killed them, put them in prison, scared them out. And we benefit. Our economy grows. We've got more stability based upon that. And it's also a clear, complete difference between us and communist China. For us, it's a foundational freedom. For them, it's an existential threat. I'm finishing up a book now on China's war on faith. And it just drives into me so much. I believe the lessons they learned, the Chinese communists, from the fall of the Soviet Union is you got to get the religious people under your
control.
Boot. You got to have them under your boot. And they are going hammer and tong on them all.
Well, it's clear that this passion that you have to protect religious freedom, it just comes from a place, inside it's dear to your heart. What was the catalyst for this? Has this always been something that you felt deeply, or was there a catalyst point? How did this become kind of the focus of your career at this point?
Yeah, it's a calling. Lord's given it to me.
Yeah.
It became really real when my faith became real. Mm. But then I had a staff member that who was working on these cases. This is back in 1997. And I didn't even know it was a field, religious freedom. But she came into the office and was working there. And she said, hey, there's these guys in Uzbekistan. They're locked up in jail for being missionaries there. And we can write a letter and see if we can get them out. And I said, sure, go ahead. I'm going to write a letter from a senator to Uzbekistan. I don't even know where it is. But we did. And she calls me up and says, we got him out. They responded. And I was hooked then. I thought, what? I can write a letter and get somebody out of jail? Who's next? Where else? What else can we do? What can we do? And that really showed me the power of the U.S. to push this.
Yeah, as it should be.
As it should be. Mm. And I continued to carry that on forward. It's just, unfortunately, the authoritarians have learned the lesson, too, that they have to control religious people. Because religious people are basically the only ones that will stand up to them.
Well, real quick, I can't resist asking how your faith became real to you.
I got cancer early on when I was in the house in '95. A fairly simple cancer, but it was one of those in between the time period when you know whether it's really serious or not. I just was really, and I was finally just, Lord God, you're either real or you're not. And I think most people live in that gray way too often, where they're just going, I'm not going to wrestle with this question. I'm just going to assume he's real, and I just go on.
Yeah.
Well, when you're facing that, you're kind of going, I got to know you're real. I've got to know this is real. And I wrestled enough with it. He is. He's there. He's with us. And that's what made it. That's what made it real.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, happy to.
Well, if you got a minute I just want to throw another question in there. Victoria, let's talk about the defunding of Planned Parenthood, because I know human life, protecting human life is one of your heart cries.
Yeah, I mean, this has been something, as you know, since you were in office, that, the pro-life movement has been trying to do for literally decades. And we're finally seeing mobility there. We're finally seeing movement. What do you think this means for the long haul, getting this foot in the door where we finally have, of course, courts are trying to, they're trying to stop this in court, but.
I think it's fabulous. I think it's amazing. And this is such a problem. The level of abortions, this is killing a child, and we're doing it as a country, and we're paying with the taxpayer dollars. These are the sort of things that if sin leads to war, these are sins that lead to war.
That's convicting.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
and that's what Harriet Beecher Stowe writes at the end of Uncle Tom's Cabin that was so impactful in the Civil War era. This is a sin when you enslave somebody. This is a sin when you kill somebody, and we just got to keep at this fight. After we overturned Roe, which was an absolutely miraculous thing. I didn't believe we could do it.
Not in my lifetime. I wanted to, but
Same here.
Trying to believe that it could happen is amazing.
That's basically where I was. I was trying to believe it could happen, and then it does. Well, but then you've had 50 years of pro-choice laws that people have gotten used to.
Right.
And so it's like we blew down the fort of Roe finally, but now you go to hand-to-hand combat, and they've rested, and we've been fighting for 50 years, and they've been whipping us. So, now you've got to start crawling back. And this, I think, is a major,
Good analogy.
Major victory on the crawl back in this hand-to-hand combat. We've got to change hearts and minds in the country. And we've got to stop, particularly I think you stop it with taxpayer funding of abortion. You really start going at it there.
Well, and it's interesting because the people that, when you think about elected office, those trying to keep Planned Parenthood's funding, those desperate hanging on to the abortion issue are also the ones that tend to block religious freedom. And I think those people that are passionate about religious freedom, we understand that there's a creator, and it gives us this passion around humanity,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It could be, if there is a creator, if we are special creations, and that's multiple faiths. That's not one faith. There's many faiths that believe that. But the bottom line is, for a Christian, he knit us together in our mother's womb. So we have to care about that. And so they tend to dovetail when you're thinking about elections and you're thinking about,
They do.
how do we shape our.
And they're not perfect by any means, but it's basically, do you believe there's a divine or not? And that's one of the biggest dividers between the two parties today,
Yep.
which is a terrible division to have. That's not what you want to be. And we haven't until really recent decades been divided like that.
Yeah.
Normally, it was just, this is a very God-fearing country, and our motto is "In God We Trust," and we've seen the hand of God in so many different things that this country's been a part of, and we've been so blessed. This is a nation of nations. We're of every nation on the planet has substantial number of people in the United States, and yet, you've got these things like this that now are so woven into a lot of our culture that we've got to unweave, because this is just this is a terrible thing.
Even the founding fathers could, if they were deists, they could unite and come together, with Christians. But we seem to be losing even that basic concept.
Well, our census data tells us we have more nuns, right? People who identify with no faith than we've ever had before. And unfortunately, they have reason to protect faith too. They just don't necessarily know that, meaning faith has done so much for this nation. When you think about adoption and hospitals and the poor, it is people of faith that are the help to our communities in large part. So even people who have no faith really should want to protect that, but we have to help them make the connection that truly people of faith are the ones contributing in such a positive way to our society, and that's been lost.
The left really should recognize that there's a lot more here in that basic Judeo-Christian ethic of the dignity of the individual to work with.
I mean, that's what's so ironic with leftist college students demonstrating with Hamas or the LGBT. You see the LGBTQ banners with Hamas demonstrations here on our college campuses that they don't understand that. And of course, we would
have them go try to protest in the Palestinian Authority area. Wow, you'll get killed.
And there's some messiness with freedom, but that's not to be confused with protecting children with these gender transition surgeries and the parental rights in schools. We could go through a whole discussion on that. But Ambassador, how can people come alongside what you're doing? And just, is there any way for the average person listening to this to support what you're doing with religious freedom?
Oh, yeah. I mean, depending on what area they want to go into. If they want to go internationally, they can look at our websites on irfsummit.org, irfsummit.org.
Okay.
Or if they want to do it in the domestic field, we've got this National Council for Religious Freedom, ncrf.org, ncrf.org on either of those spaces. Need lots of help and support. We really got to make the religious freedom movement a grassroots movement. It's got to go into the grassroots where people locally start pushing for these sorts of things. That's why part of what I love about what Virginia is doing, that let's start digging these cases out and you showcase them, and then people go, oh, wait a minute, why is this going on here?
So much to be done in our Commonwealth.
There is, but that's how you drive it to where it actually things happen more, and it becomes more organic, and it becomes more individuals, and then people start standing up and say, well, wait a minute, this happened to me here. I was kicked out as an insurance agent because I'm a committed Christian, and I put it on my website, and you're going, well, you shouldn't be thrown out of being a insurance agent because
it does seem like every time we talk about a case that our law center gets, another case comes forward. I mean, it just, we're talking about the realtor, and then we have these, I don't know if you heard our Loudoun case, there are 3 young boys, and and literally Loudoun County is treating the 2 Christian boys different than the Muslim boy. And that's an odd, religious freedom issue. It's like, wait, why do all faiths
they dropped the charges.
They dropped the charges of the Muslim boy and actually added a charge to the Christian boys. And we can't. The fact pattern is the same. I mean, it's a bizarre world that we're in. So we just keep finding more and more of these individuals who just are struggling through it and end up needing to do it in the court system. But thank heavens we have the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Now we don't necessarily always go there. We a lot of times we're dealing with state laws in our Commonwealth. But anyway, we're grateful for the work that you are doing, both nationally and internationally. We need champions. We need champions for this.
And I think that there's an era now that we're in that we can really push it.
Right. This is the time.
This is it. In politics, you work with your ebbs and flows, and when things are ebbing, you just kind of hunker down and you try not to get drowned. And when they flow, go, move.
Yep.
And this is the season really for people to move forward. Get out of your foxholes and go.
This is the
season to speak up. So that's a great way to wrap up here. One of the most moving parts of that whole interview to me, and I didn't expect this, but he explained to us that the reason he got so passionate about religious freedom in the first place is because he went through a personal battle with cancer. And that's when he really started digging in about his personal faith.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful testimony he has. And that God would, take somebody through such a hard thing, cancer, but in order to make him such a powerful leader on an international stage. So I also appreciated just this when you have somebody that has a global perspective. Sometimes we're a little bit myopic. We see our neighborhood, we see our state, we see maybe our nation, but he really gets that rights aren't to be taken for granted. And I think he worries about Americans. And I think, his comments about just making sure that that freedom is only one generation, whatever it was that Reagan said, like it's like we have to really guard and protect these freedoms and that's why he wants these issues exposed when religious freedom is when people of faith are persecuted. He wants to make sure that's exposed because he wants us to be vigilant. And I appreciated that in his message.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap for today. And I'll just mention that if you want to join alongside us in the battle to protect religious freedoms and free speech rights, an easy way to do that is just make people aware of the legal resources that are out there to stand behind them, especially our Founding Freedoms Law Center. Those attorneys are working hard, getting more cases every day. So you can jump in and be part of that in two ways. One, just let people know that they exist, Founding Freedoms Law Center, and we'll put the URL here on the screen, foundingfreedomslaw.org. And also you can support them. I know they have a dire need right now for more legal support on the team, so that's helpful too. And with that said, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to spread the word and just other people to hear all that's going on in Virginia, remember to share our playlist, Speak Up Virginia, on YouTube. You can get there also on our website, familyfoundation.org. And also if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, things like that, make sure to give us a good review, 5-star review. That helps get the word out and spread it to more people. So we'll see you next time. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together.